You've read the title. The title of today's episode is The Great Distraction. I'm going to be talking about a concept that I think everyone really understands that we are in this current state, but not many people know a way out, and not many people know the true alternative way that I believe we should be heading towards. And that is what I'll be talking about today's episode. If you do not know who I am, my name is Champ, and I help men build their foundation of winning. And with that being said, I feel like today is going to be another one of these episodes where I'm not necessarily giving you advice that you can directly take, but just something to observe, and hopefully you can adjust your behavior accordingly. Um, but yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. The Great Distraction, right? You have the Great Depression, you have the Great Recession, and now we are living in a state, whether people know it or not, a thing that I would like to call the Great Distraction. The Great Distraction obviously is as simple um, as it said, right? It is something that we are currently all going through when it comes to this age of distraction, right? Whether it's the children, whether it's people that are my age, let's just say 18 to 25, and let's just say even people older as well. We are all getting distracted. We are all being misled. We're all being misguided into different things that aren't necessarily good for us, and I'll go ahead and get into it, right? I'm going to start with this, and I don't want this to really have the most religious sentiment when I speak on this because I'm not the most religious person, but I do want to mention this. First, with the Great Distraction, I feel like we are farther away from faith, right? Not only faith in God, but faith in yourself, faith in your potential, faith in a great future, faith in a positive outlook, right? Faith in optimism itself, right? And that's something that I think is very, very interesting because it really those are the things that I believe to be the foundation of society, right? If you don't believe in God, if you don't believe and have faith in yourself, if you don't have faith in your potential or your existence, as far as how it will go in the future, right? I guess you could call it the potential, but I believe that that is the foundation of society. That is what grounds everyone to what I believe they should be grounded to. That's hopefully going to align them in the correct manner. But I believe that the Great Distraction is meant to distort your vision when it comes to having faith, like I mentioned, having faith in God, having faith in yourself, having faith in your potential. It is we live in a society that's showing us so many different things, whether it's the comparison of other people and what they're doing with their lives, right? Whether it's leading us away from the family unit, right? Having faith that the family unit can be a thing that is existing within today's society. There are so many things that we are getting farther away from, and that is the way I wanted to start it. Getting into the next thing, I believe that is part of the Great Distraction. I feel like we're getting farther away from the truth, right? We had this weird thing within society when it comes to somewhat governing the internet by um, spreading what do they call it? Spreading misinformation, whatever the hell it was, whatever that even means, right? But essentially, what I believe is we're farthest away from the truth, right? I feel like there's people that are coming to this awakening currently, but I do believe that we're at a period of time where, because of the many distractions that do exist, it is easiest time to be misguided and easiest time to believe that certain things are the truth when in reality they are farthest from the truth. And obviously, we all understand that information in today's society is very, very abundant, but with an abundance of information, you're going to have also an abundance of lies, that are truly fed to us to go ahead and misguide us, like I had mentioned. And this all going to come back down to the distraction, right? It's going to distract you from the many things that I have already discussed, but that is something that I believe that everyone should be doing, is actively trying to seek out the truth, whatever that looks like for you, but just seek out things that are more true, right? Don't necessarily believe all of what society is purporting because, like I had mentioned, society is purporting a bunch of lies that aren't conducive to the individual's life or aren't conducive to truly the community, the life of the community, right? And with that being said, that is going to get you farther and farther from the truth. So if you're a person like me who is a truth seeker, you should begin to point out the certain lies that are being told and hopefully be able to speak on the truths that we all internally believe whether we've been programmed incorrectly or not, I do believe that we all have a good understanding of what the truth is and what lies truly feel like. So I believe that we are the farthest away from the truth. And with that being said, this is the era of the great distraction. Getting to the next one that I believe is also super, super prevalent and something that I had mentioned is what grounds us in our foundation that we must exist within or we will literally go insane. And this is, I feel like we're farther away from our purpose, right? Our purpose is going to be one thing, especially as a man, and especially, I'll even speak with women. I don't necessarily speak with purpose and women in the same sentence. I usually mention that with men, but I believe that with the great distraction, men feel in this day and age, they don't feel as purposeful, and they don't find a cause that is bigger than themselves. Quite frankly, all the causes, rather all their motivations, all their um, yeah, I'll say all their motivations are really outside of them, and in the worst way possible, because there's a lot of motivations that can be outside of you that can be very, very positive, but I don't necessarily see that in today's society. And I do believe that, with that being said, right, farther away from our purpose, you have society programming women in today's society to not want to be mothers, right? To not understand the true value and importance and the essentially being one of the most essential parts to the family unit, which is to be a good mother who's going to do and be and to live out the purpose of being a mother. That is the entire point of the woman's life, is to be a mother, right? Maybe not the entire point, but it's like 90. It's at least 70% of a life of a woman is to be living within her purpose when it comes to, or that I would say that 70% at least of what a woman's purpose is, right? For a man, our purpose could be many different things, right? And with that being said, I do believe we are clearly, clearly being distracted, because you see so many men not living for anything, not truly striving for anything, right? Their faith in themselves, their faith in God, their faith in their potential, those have all disintegrated. They've been content and satisfied with the life that is less than satisfactory, but quite frankly, at least it's comfortable, convenient, fun, all these words that aren't aligned with purpose. But quite frankly, in the age of the great distraction, this is exactly what the people who are programming all of us would want. They would want us to be confused. They would want us to be distracted. They would want us farthest away from our potential, farthest away from our purpose. And that is exactly what I see in it. Maybe you see something different. Maybe you see exactly what I'm talking about. But quite frankly, I don't see enough people talking about this. I do see some people talking about this, but I do believe it is, of course, my responsibility to talk about and to speak on the things that I believe are the truth. So yes, I believe that within the age and the era of the great distraction, I do believe that we're the farthest away from our purpose, right? Men don't live for anything anymore. Men don't die, aren't willing to die for anything anymore. And that is our purpose as men. And women don't want to be women. They don't want to have children. They want to put that off. They want to act like other things are more important. And quite frankly, the sad reality is that you've been programmed into believing these lies, and then when you go and live it out, you wonder why it's not as fulfilling. And it's not as fulfilling because you're not living within your purpose. A lot of women are pursuing careers, they're pursuing education over pursuing building a family, which is ridiculous, right? You have women spending 90% of their energy pursuing a certain career, when in reality they should be spending just as much, if not more, in finding a man that's going to give them the life that they would like to live, right? Who's going to help build that life with them, right? And that is just part of the era of the great distraction, is women not necessarily knowing what is good and what is bad and what is worth having and what is not worth having. And that only comes when people are going to be distracted, is when they stop valuing and stop listening to the inner voice that's within inside of them, right? I feel like there's a lot of women, at least this is what I believe, I feel like there's a lot of women in today's society more than ever who are neglecting their nature, and they're neglecting some of the ways in which they naturally are, just to appease, or rather just to, yeah, I would say just to appease society, just to be a part of society, right? Instead of saying, you know what, I feel different than what society is telling me, right? Women don't want to they don't want to be excluded from the group. So therefore, even if it is against their nature, which I believe women in today's society with the great distraction, They're living outside of their nature. There's women that believe all the things that I've said, but still are taking the life path that I just had illustrated that is going to lead them to a less purposeful life. But yet they will go along with that false narrative, that fake reality, because it's exactly what society is purporting. So I think that is a huge element of the great distraction. Getting into the next one, this is going to be one that I've discussed on the past few podcasts, vaguely and in depth as well. But I feel like we're farthest away from our present moment, whatever that looks like for us, right? I feel like we get so caught up in the past or so caught up in the future that we forget to live in the present, and it is very, very easy to get distracted because here's the thing. Maybe we're not even thinking about the past. Maybe we're not even thinking about the future, but we're for damn sure thinking about everything else that is outside of us that isn't the present moment. We're thinking about, oh, what's happening in the world, like over 15,000, damn near almost 100,000 miles away, but yet it's of our concern, and we feel like it's something that is important to us, when in reality it's not going to affect our life on the daily. And I think that is farthest away from this from the present moment, right? Me talking about that, I will hope that it would bring you in the present moment when I'm speaking about these certain things, but that is part of the great distraction. You must understand that we are all being programmed. And when I say that, I mean actually programmed. We are all being brainwashed to believe there's certain things that are of importance to our present moment when they have absolutely nothing to do with us, when they have absolutely nothing to do with our present moment. Yet, society is going to condition us to say, hey, these things are important. Oh, people are talking about them. Maybe it's something that you should talk about. Maybe it's something you should think about. Or maybe it's something within the news that is meant to inform you, when in reality it's literally meant to just fearmonger you. And that is part of the great distraction. You're going to have plenty of information. And like I had mentioned, right, information is abundant. And with information being abundant, there's going to be a lot of information, and I would say probably 98% of all the information that is out there has nothing to do with you. Has nothing to do with you in your present moment. So with that being said, that's something that you must consider. We're farthest away from the present moment. That is the great distraction. That is the intent. That is the goal. Getting into the next one. And if you feel like we're getting farthest away because of a distraction from any of these things, maybe it's something that is different than anything that I'll mention on today's episode, I feel free to leave it in the comments. I want to hear your guys' contributions. I want to hear the difference of opinions that you guys have when it comes to the great distraction, because there are some elements that I am missing, and I believe that are missing. So, getting into the next one, I feel like we are farthest away from our loved ones. And this one's going to be a little bit different because everybody's situation is slightly different, right? We're going to have different family values. Some people are going to have more strong family values. Some people are going to have much more weak family values. Some people are going to have unique and individual situations with their family. But I'm speaking for most people, right? I would say most people don't really have a very, very strong family unit to the point where they're very, very close with their loved ones. And I believe in this age of the great distraction, we are more focused, and our attention is more captivated by things that aren't important to us. And when shit hits the fan in this life, and reminds us of the importance of our family, the importance of the little things, the importance of our health, then that's when we begin to listen. But quite frankly, it's at a point of when it's too late already. So yes, the great distraction, I believe, is making us more and more distant from each other, more and more distant from the people that we actually care about, or at least the people that we should care about. I'll say that. And with that being said, yes, there's going to be plenty of things that distract us from all of these things that I've mentioned on today's episode. But I do believe that that is something that you should be very, very conscious of and be very, very mindful of when you're walking into the world, right? You must understand that these things do exist. These things are going to affect your life. These things are things that are affecting everyone, right? And thankfully, I come from a family, me personally, right? I can only speak on my personal experience, but I don't believe that the great distraction has led me astray when it comes to my family values, right? I feel like I was instilled with a bunch of family values that I carry on to this day. And the great distraction, quite frankly, didn't phase me nor my family about my own personal values. And at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to, right? It comes down to your personal values, right? Do you have a value structure or do you not? Most people don't, so therefore they're distracted. That's what it is. And even people that do have some, maybe it's not as strong as it could be, so you still get distracted. So that's just what it is. So all the things that I've mentioned, you should have a value structure that says that these things are of importance, right? Being close to your loved ones, being in the present moment, living within your purpose, seeking out truth, getting closer and having more faith within yourself, your potential, and with God, right? I feel like all those things should be a part of your value structure, your value hierarchy, whatever you would like to call it. But at the end of the day, if they aren't, what is in control? What is of your actual value, whether it's defined or whether it isn't defined? If you believe that there are things that are much more important, I would love to hear them. And we would all love to hear them. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and continue. I do believe that we are obviously farthest away from our families, and that's going to create a lot of tension. That's going to create a lot of other problems that we aren't necessarily taking into account that could be affecting us. And yeah, I'll say that. Getting into the next one, I feel like with the great distraction, in this era of the great distraction that we all live within, I believe that we are farthest away from our creative insight. And most people aren't in tune with this anyways, and I understand that. But even the people, and I would consider myself a person who is a creative. I would consider myself a person who does act on sparks of creative insight. And with that being said, even me, I still see myself falling into the trap of the great distraction. And from there, it makes me really, really think, because here's the thing: most people don't even have a creative structure or foundation at all. And if I can get distracted, let alone if I can get distracted, that just means everybody else who has any less of a creative insight than I do, that means they're so cooked it doesn't even matter, quite frankly, almost. So with that being said, I do believe that is something that also should be, and hopefully has some utility within your life when it comes to your own purpose, right? Hopefully you're creative in your own individual way, whatever that is, and it should maybe it will have something to do with what I do. Maybe it has something that's completely opposite. But quite frankly, I believe that it's going to be easy for us to get distracted, to get away from that creative insight that should be leading and guiding you along your way. That's going to give your life a lot more color, a lot more fulfillment, a lot more purpose, right? I feel like there's certain things about the creative insight that I will talk about, right? That it's what I believe to be a voice that's within your head, right? And this can come in many different forms, but I believe that there's a voice within everybody's head that's going to lead them down a more creative path, right? Some people don't hear the voice, right? They don't hear the voice of their own mind because they're so distracted. They're so caught up with a lot of things that are happening within society that have absolutely nothing to do with them in the first place, right? They're so caught up with all the distractions that do exist, and I can name 100,000 different distractions, right? But at the end of the day, understand that your creative insight is going to be one of the most, and it should be one of the most powerful things that you do have in this life. And if you're getting distracted because you're watching an anime, or you're getting distracted because you're caught up watching Love Island, you're so fucking cooked. It's ridiculous, right? Understand that this is all part of the great distraction. When you start caring about things that have absolutely nothing to do with you, right? That's when you're going to be misled. And of course, I'm not saying don't watch any movies or don't watch any shows. I'm just saying, is it worth you being distracted? Is it worth you getting farther away from your creative insight, farther away from your loved ones, farther away from the present moment, farther away from pursuing your purpose, farther away from living and seeking the truth, and farther away from the faith that you have within yourself, within your purpose, within God, hopefully? If it's getting you away from all those things, I believe that you must restructure your habits. I believe that you must establish somewhat of a value structure within your life. And if you don't, you're going to be dealing and living with the consequences that you didn't necessarily, intend on. And if you're okay with that, you're okay with that. But if you're not, don't be a victim. Don't self-sabotage when you don't have to, right? So yes, people don't listen, or they don't even hear their own mind, because if they get bored, they want to distract themselves in any and every way. There's a lot of different ways in which somebody can distract themselves in today's society, in today's era of the great distraction. There's plenty of things that you can distract yourself with. But at the end of the day, like I said, is it aligned with your value hierarchy? Is it aligned with your value structure? If it's not, you know, you must make an adjustment. And the last one that I will mention is going to be this concept that I believe with the great distraction, we are farther away from sex and bonding. Sex that means something, that isn't just recreational, that isn't just for fun, right? I believe in today's society, we are distracted by more lust, and we have more modern day conventions that avoid us from feeling the need to have some of the most basic human experiences. So, with that being said, the great distraction. You see it. I'm sure you see it. If you're a guy watching this, I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you see plenty of Instagram models that are doing OnlyFans. I'm sure you've seen all those things, right? It's very, very hard to get away from that. And of course, these things are meant to manipulate our decision making. They're meant to influence our mind. They're meant to distract us from the purpose. They're meant to distract us from finding a good woman. They're meant to distract us from bonding with our partners. This is exactly what it's meant to do. This is the great distraction, right? And with that being said, I don't even really have to explain it. I really don't even have to explain this one as in depth as I really have to explain any of the other ones, right? You see exactly what I'm talking about, right? I'll go even going with this with the example that I used earlier, which I really don't know shit about this show, but I understand that it's very, very popular, and I understand that it's probably going to be very, very lustful, right? You have the Love Island example, right? This is something that is at least in my time right now, very, very popular, very, very prevalent, very, very relevant to the people who believe in things that aren't relevant to their lives, right? But I do believe that those are the things that push you away from truly bonding with the person that you have, or truly finding and wanting to seek out a bond with somebody else, or puts you in a farther state than what I believe, whether people know it or not, is their more desirable state, which is to be pursuing, hopefully, the foundation of society, which is the family unit. So, yes, all these things that I mentioned on today's episode are a part of the great distraction. Is there many more distractions? Is there many more things that I believe we're getting farther away from? I do believe so, right? I do believe that you could even mention, maybe one that I didn't mention, that is just as powerful as all the ones that I've mentioned. But with that being said, you must understand that these things exist to blur your vision of the correct or more correct path to go down. And it's all going to come down to you. I've made plenty of episodes on this because I believe it's very, very important when it comes to understanding what you truly value, and then beginning to ask yourself if you are actually living within the values that you set out for yourself, that you should hopefully live by, right? So, with that being said, what are certain elements of the great distraction that you seem to be most vulnerable of? Right? For me, I'll be honest. Farther away from faith, that is going to be a huge one that I'd say is an issue that I've had, that I'm currently battling right now, that I could say is part of what the great distraction is getting me away from. But at least I recognize this, and I understand how it's set up, and I can break I can break the trap that is set up for me. So I'd say that one, farther away from the truth. I feel like I'm closer to the truth than I have ever been. Farther away from my purpose. I believe that is also one of those things that can distract me, right? I have been super locked in on my purpose, and I've also been a little less than locked in on my purpose. But I do believe that's something that can be very, very much another element of the great distraction that can affect me, right? Farther away from the present, I've discussed that before, right? Just watch, if you watch some of the last 5 episodes, you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. Farther away from loved ones, I already said that one's not applying to me. Creative insight, that's going to be another one, right? Farther away from creative insight, this is a recent issue that I've had up until last night and this morning, where I feel like I was just not in tune with my creative insight that I naturally have, that I'm naturally usually in tune with, and I do believe that is part of, because just being on your phone unnecessarily, right? That is another part, or just paying attention to shit that isn't important, right? And like I had mentioned, right, all these things really blur our vision for the correct or more correct paths that do exist for us, that we must discover ourselves based off of the things in which we already value. So, the questions I have for you is this: do you know and do you live by the values that you have? And if these things are a little bit more unconscious, if you feel like you have a good firm grasp on what you value, then I suggest you write it down. Why? Number one, you can refer back to it. Number two, you can clearly define it and all have it in one space. And it's just a very good thing to have, because here's the thing: living and thinking that you have some of these things of value, I'm just gonna let you know right now, you're not going to be able to live as strong within your values if they're not actually all in one place, right? So that is what I recommend. I'm not saying it's impossible for you to have strong values and for you to not write them down, but I'm saying most people that don't write them down don't have strong values. That's what I will say. So with that being said, this is the great distraction. Understand that these things are meant to mislead us. Understand that there are greater entities that do exist that are meant to distract us, that are meant to keep us away from the things that we should value, that when we understand and observe the world and the landscape of the environment that we are all currently in, there are certain things in which the people that we look up to, there are certain things in which they value. There are certain things that we all intrinsically value within ourselves. And understand that there are systems set up in place to mislead you, that are set up to misguide you, that are a part of the great distraction. And it is your initiative that you should take on yourself to say, you know what, I understand that this is exactly happening, and I understand that I have the power. I now have the choice. I now have the power, and I now have and should have always had the values that are going to correct me, and that are going to help guide me down the right path that I'm meant to go down. And it's as simple as that, man. This is episode 238 of the Life of Champ podcast, talking about the great distraction. But that's all I have to say for today's episode. I'm sure there's plenty more. Make sure to go ahead and leave in the comments. But tap in with me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, and on Spotify at Life of a Champ podcast on every single platform. Next podcast is going to be on Thursday. Tap in with that for sure, as well as make sure you go and tap in with the live stream that I'll be having Monday. I know I've been saying that for a while, and I'll hold myself accountable. I've been saying I'm going to be going live for the last damn near 7 weeks, but trust me, I have a live on Monday coming up very, very soon. So tap in with that for sure. If there's a certain creator, or if there's a certain video that I'm going to go ahead and react to, I'm more than willing to do that on a Monday. Just go ahead and leave it in the comments, and I'll go ahead and tap in with that for sure. But other than that, that's all I have to say. And before I let you guys go, I just want to welcome you to the winning team. Welcome to the winning team. Hopefully you took something from this episode. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and that's all I have to say for you. Thank you for your time and attention, and until the next Thursday.